let's go ahead and look at our vocabulary, do a vocabulary review, and if you would like, it would probably be a good idea if you cut these out and put them in your math section of your 3-subject notebook. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a fraction. I don't think y'all can see. Let's see. Should be able to see that. Fraction. What is a fraction? And of course, by this point, since you had fractions last year, you know that a fraction is when we are talking about part of a whole number. A number that names part of a whole or a group. So we have, for example, if we had the fraction 3/4 of a cake, okay, 3/4. The cake, of course, is one whole cake, and the cake would be divided into 4 parts. And of course, I ate 3 out of 4 of those parts. 3/4. A number that names part of a whole. Remember, another word for fraction is decimal. A decimal and fraction mean the same thing. They're parts of a whole number. Okay, now we're going to go to numerator. And I hope y'all can see this. Let me check. Make sure you can see numerator on your screen. Might need to pull it down here. Numerator, go down a little. Okay. Make a mark right here on my, so I know about where to pull it. Okay, numerator. The number above the line in a fraction, it tells how many equal parts are described. So I like to think of the numerator as in 3/4, telling me how many selected. How many are we talking about? How many is selected out of the whole? And for example, once again, I have a cake, a whole cake. I divide it into 4 parts, and I eat 3 out of 4 of those parts. Okay? Now our denominator, the number below the line in a fraction, it tells how many equal parts are in a whole. So 3/4. The 4 just tells me how to divide my whole, the denominator. And remember, I told you, denominator starts with D, and it's down in your fraction. It's on the bottom, down. Okay, equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are 2 or more fractions that name the same part of the whole. Okay, we work a lot with equivalent fractions. And remember, we've talked about that equivalent fractions take up the same amount of space. For example, if I had my cake divided into 4 parts, and I ate 2 out of 4, and that of course would be 2/4, and I had another cake, and I divided it into 2 parts, and I ate 1 out of 2, or half of it, I can see that these parts are equal because they take up the same space. Therefore, they are equivalent. Equivalent has the word equal. Okay? EQUI. Now let's continue on with mixed numbers. A mixed number, that right there. A mixed number is a number with a whole part and a fractional part. So, for example, if I fix one whole cake, that's my whole. And I fix another cake, and this cake, of course, is divided into four, can be divided into fractions. And I just have one piece. At the end of dinner, I can say that we ate one whole cake plus 1/4, and that would be my mixed number. And I also could make it into an improper fraction, which we'll do in just a second, because if I cut this cake into fours, I'm going to assume that my whole is in fours. I have to be talking about the same thing, equivalent. That this is 4 out of 4. This is 4 out of 4. This is 1 out of 4. So that equals the same thing as 5/4. Mixed number. But a mixed number is when you have a whole number and a fraction. A decimal fraction is what we did yesterday. And a decimal 0.75 would of course be, if I divided it into, if I had hundreds here, tenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I would have 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I drew too many. And then a half. Okay, 7.5. A number contains a decimal point that separates a whole from a fractional place value, such as tenths and hundredths. And of course, this is my tenths. This means 7 out of 10. And the 5 represents 5 out of 100. Or it can both equal 75 out of 100. Okay? Now, improper fractions, we just went over when we did mixed numbers, but we'll just reiterate that. The numerator is always greater than the denominator. So, for example, with 5/4, I know that I have a whole number, so I'm going to draw it out. And since I have a whole, anytime I have a whole number in fractions, my numerator and denominator is the same, which means 1 whole. 4 out of 4 is a whole. 1 whole, and I need an extra one. So I would draw it this way, 1/4. And I can see that my improper fraction equals my mixed number of 1 whole and 1/4. Or 4 and 4 and 1/4, and that would equal 5/4. Okay, so that's our review for today for our vocabulary. Thank you.